What's up, guys? We are back with part 2 of our dietary pros and cons series. So in this part of the series, as you can tell by what it says on the screen, we are going to look at ketogenic and low carb, high fat diets. The majority of the time is going to be talking about ketogenic diets, and we're going to discuss exactly why that is and why low carb, high fat is kind of a murky term. It's earlier than usual, so forgive me while I sip my delicious coffee. But this is going to be a genuine pro and con examination, just like with IFYM and flexible dieting. We're actually going to give this a try. We're not going to bash. We're going to say what we think is actually good and what we think is bad about these diets. All right, up first, just like with IFYM and flexible dieting, those two terms are used interchangeably and they're not the same. So the same thing is true when we talk about ketogenic dieting and low carb, high fat strategies. So ketogenic dieting, if we want to define that, is a diet that produces ketones. Okay, well, how do I get my body to produce ketones? There's a few different ways that you can get the body to produce ketones. Remember, we're just trying to metabolize fats here. So how to get into ketosis? You can fast for a long period of time. So go for an 18, 24, 48 hour fast. When you start to run out of glucose, the body will start to produce ketones to run on. Can exercise for a long period of time. Similar to fasting, when you run out of other substrates, you are going to start producing ketones, so the body has those to run on. Get into some stuff with diabetes, diabetic ketoacidosis, things like that. We won't spend much time talking about that, but that is a big concern for those who suffer from diabetes. You can supplement with ketones, so you can take some of these exogenous ketone supplements or MCTs. That will ramp up your body's production of ketones. Or you can do what we're going to talk about here, which is just following a ketogenic diet. Now, a question for you. When you are following the ketogenic diet or followers of the ketogenic diet, what do you track? Net or total carbohydrates? And why? And I'll let you answer that in the comments. And then the first person who gets it right, I'll give them a ding, 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 and the rest of you will know. So what is it? Net or total carbohydrates? I'll give you a hint on this one. What is it that kicks you out of ketosis? What do you ingest that kicks you out of ketosis? And what role does that play with net and total carbohydrates? So in the comments below. So your traditional ketogenic diet is a macronutrient split or percentages of roughly 70 to 75. You'll see different numbers quoted. I just went with 70. 70% of your macronutrient or your calories coming from dietary fat, 20 to 25% coming from protein, and then 5 to 10% coming from carbohydrate. Now, what's interesting about this is that I can switch some of these macronutrients around and I can still create a ketogenic diet. And you guys may have heard of something called a protein-spared modified fast. Now, if I just eat a very high protein diet, 80% protein, 10% fat or 15% fat and 5% carbohydrate, because of the low carbohydrate availability of the diet, I will still get into ketosis. So there's a lot of ways to get into ketosis. And I've always had the question, I heard this discussed on the Stronger by Science podcast with Eric Trexler or Eric Helms, whatever his name is, and Greg Nuckols, his temporary co-host. And Eric Trexler posed the question that, does a ketogenic diet actually need that additional fat? What if we just took the fat out and only used protein? And how much protein is needed to kick you out of ketosis? The research is still out on that. So with protein-spared modified fast, you do get into ketosis. Is that a version of the ketogenic diet? I'm not sure what the consensus would be in the keto crowd, the keto sphere. Now, differentiating from that ketogenic diet, now we've got what people call a low-carb, high-fat diet. And this is a very, very wishy-washy kind of term because there's a variety of different strategies here. How do we define low carb? Is it lower than the RDA? Because the RDA says that I should consume 50 to 65% of my calories from carbohydrates. So if I go to 45 or 40, is that a low carbohydrate diet? It's lower than what they recommend. So is that a low carbohydrate diet? I would say no. If you're eating a good amount of carbohydrate or if you're eating a good amount of calories, 40% of that could be 300 grams of carbs. That is in no way, shape, or form a low carbohydrate diet. So what do? Do we use grams? Do we use the ketogenic diet cutoff, which is usually less than 50 grams? Maybe you use less than 150. I've seen some research that says 150 is the cutoff. Do we want to use percentages? So does it have to be less than 10% of your total calories or 5% of your total calories? How do we actually define what a low carb diet is? So when you are looking at these low carb, high fat diet studies, make sure you look at what the actual carbohydrate consumption is. Some of them will say they followed a low carb protocol. Their carbohydrates were under 200 grams. Well, shit, that's not a low carb protocol. It's not even close to throwing them into ketosis. So what are we actually trying to accomplish here? And what is the definition of these low carb diets? So that's why the focus of this presentation is going to be about the ketogenic diet, because it is explicitly defined, as opposed to the low carb strategy, which is apparently whatever the hell you want it to be. So just focusing on keto. And we're going to only look at body composition. Some mentions of clinical conditions, some mentions of athletic performance, but we're just going to pretty much stick to body composition. All right. So the question exists on Instagram, on social media, Facebook, wherever you look. People say high carb, low fat, high carb, or high carb, low fat, low carb. What is the best diet to follow? What is the brass tacks here? And the Diet Fit study out of Stanford looked at exactly that. So you can kind of Google the title if you want. It's a long one. It's a mouthful. Effective low fat versus low carbohydrate diet. 12-month weight loss in overweight adults and the association with genotype and insulin secretion. So they also wanted to look at, was the weight loss that these individuals experienced associated with a certain genotype pattern or a level of insulin secretion? You'll hear people say that. They'll say, well, my genes or my genotype pattern makes me more favorable to eating a high carb or a high fat diet. Or people will say, I'm very insulin sensitive, or I'm insulin resistant, therefore I need to go on a lower or a higher carb diet. So they wanted to kind of tease out those issues as well. Getting into some of the nitty gritty on this piece of research, there were 609 adults aged 18 to 50, BMI between 28 and 40. So everyone in the study was either overweight or obese. They were randomized into a 12-month trial. They either went with the low carb group or the low fat group. Now, when you look at these percentages here, you'll notice that the groups aren't really that different. Again, they called low carb here 30% of their carbohydrate intake, only an 18% difference from the high carb group, but we'll leave that alone. So the low carb group went 30% carbohydrate, 45% fat, and 23% protein. The high carb group was 48% carbohydrate, 29% fat, and 21% protein. Before they actually got started on their 12-month dietary journey, they received a total of 22 kind of like education sessions based off whether they were in the low carb or the high carb group. And the education sessions were essentially, all right, here's the foods that you need to emphasize. Here's how you keep your diet as low carb or as low fat as possible. And they also educated them on what healthful foods were. So they encouraged them to eat their lean meats, the healthy fats, the oils, the nuts, the seeds, things like that, and then fruits and vegetables and so on. Now, what were they actually measuring here? We were looking at 12-month weight change and weight loss, as well as if there was any interaction between the type of diet and the amount of weight they lost, their certain genotype pattern and the amount of weight they lost, or their insulin secretion levels and the amount of weight they lost, and if there was any interaction with the diet there. The results, if you are clued in with the nutrition, the dietary research, you know that when we control for calories and when we control for protein, which this study did, we see almost no difference in weight loss, and that is what happened here. No significant difference in weight change between groups. Also no association with genotype or baseline insulin secretion were associated with dietary effects on weight loss. So neither diet was superior. Both groups lost weight. Both groups improved their health. Didn't matter if they went high carb or low carb. Now let's dive into the pros of the ketogenic diet here. The biggest pro in my mind of the ketogenic diet is this huge boost in motivation you get right off the bat, because you're going to see very fast initial results on the scale. In the first 1 to 3 weeks of the ketogenic diet, you're going to see a very rapid drop off in the scale. Now, some of that is fat loss. So if you are in a caloric deficit, some of that weight that you lose will be fat loss. However, the majority of what you're going to lose in those first couple weeks will be glycogen and water weight. And people don't realize how much glycogen and water weight actually contribute to your body weight. The average male stores anywhere from 500 to 600 grams of glycogen in both their liver and their muscles in a 20-80 split respectively, which means that 600 grams of glycogen carries anywhere from 2 to 3 grams of water. We'll say 3 grams, 2.4 actually, but we'll say 3 grams just to make the math easy. 600, 3 grams of water for each. 600, 1800, put it together, 2400 grams. That's a 2.4 kilogram loss in the first week or two. Remember, it does take you a week, 2 weeks to kind of really flush out all that water and get all that glycogen out of there. Now, past that point, a long-term chronic calorie deficit is needed to continue the weight loss. And this is where most people fall off with the ketogenic diet, is they get these great results early on, they lose a bunch of weight quickly, but they can't stick to that calorie deficit, and they say, you know what, this diet doesn't work for me, I'm going to get rid of it. You still need that long-term deficit. How do I achieve that long-term deficit on the ketogenic diet? There's another pro there as well. When you look at the food composition of the keto diet, we see foods that promote satiety. So there's a very, very high satiation factor when we eat a meal that is mostly protein, fat, and fibrous vegetables. There's a reason why the research shows that when individuals switch over to a ketogenic diet, they decrease their ad libitum calorie intake, because there's only so much protein and fibrous vegetables that you can eat in one meal. You also have your results bolstered by the fact that you have decreased food choices. Go to the supermarket, find me some tasty foods that are just protein and fat, that aren't meat. Say you don't like meat. It's impossible. The tastiest foods, the ones that you get the most pleasure from, all those pleasure mechanisms in the brain, are a combination of 3 things. Fat, hooray, that's keto friendly. Salt, yeah, that's also keto friendly. Carbs, now no longer keto friendly. So your cookies, your pastries, cake, ice cream, Oreos, all that tasty stuff that people often overeat is ruled out on the ketogenic diet because of the fact that you cannot have carbohydrates. So the decrease in food choices or food availability that you have can also decrease calorie intake and give you that chronic calorie deficit that you are looking for. That is not to say that it is impossible to overeat on calories on the ketogenic diet. It absolutely is, and people do it every single day. I can eat a lot of eggs, I can eat a lot of bacon. I could definitely get myself into a calorie deficit. But for those who are really, really focused or really, really set on those tasty carb, fat, salt meals or foods, the ketogenic diet can be a good way to get away from those. Another interesting point that I wanted to add to this slide, and this is what the graphics over here are on the right. This is someone switching over to the ketogenic diet, and they had them in a chamber, in a metabolic chamber, where they measured their energy intake. And this is out of Kevin Hall's lab. Kevin Hall has done a lot of great research when it comes to the low carb, high fat versus high carb, low fat paradigm. And he showed that there was a 57 kilocalorie per day increase when someone switched over to the ketogenic diet, meaning that their resting energy, so if we look at the chart in the top right, A, so their energy chamber, their energy expenditure in the chamber rather, we see that it went up. It starts to spike up initially and then kind of goes down as time goes along. My theory on this is it's part of the keto adaptation process, some shifts in the metabolism within the body causing an increase in metabolic rate, and then it kind of drops off and returns to baseline at that 30-day mark, which is roughly when people are mostly keto adapted. The caveat here, the takeaway point, was that there was no significantly loss of body fat in that experiment when compared to the control. So what I included there is, it's probably a moot point, but it's interesting nonetheless to look at that. Moving on with some more pros here. The ketogenic diet, if you look at the picture that I included here, this is a pretty tasty looking meal right here. We've got some steak, it looks like, some chickpeas, an avocado, some onions, tomatoes, some sesame seeds on top of it. It looks like a pretty tasty meal. And the ketogenic diet as a whole, if you know how to cook, allows you to eat pretty generally tasty foods. If you give me, let's say I'm on Guy's Grocery Games, and the challenge is make a tasty meal out of a fatty cut of meat, oil, and a fibrous vegetable. Sweet, I can do that all day. So you do still get to eat tasty foods as long as you know how to prepare them. Another pro to the ketogenic diet is that it emphasizes the consumption of fibrous vegetables. People in the United States need to eat more fibrous vegetables. And if the ketogenic diet pushes them in that direction, then please follow this diet. At this point, I'll take almost anything. I feel like the average American is a little kid at the table with their mom, their dad saying, eat your damn vegetables. Eat your vegetables. They told us that it was important when we were kids. We didn't listen. We grew up. We still don't listen. And if we look at the literature, what we find is that the majority of the research shows a decrease in all-cause mortality with a higher fiber intake. Until I am proven wrong in the research, I am going to stick by my statement that increasing your fiber intake up to the recommended amount will do nothing but good for your health. It will increase your lifespan and improve your health. So the ketogenic diet does exactly that by emphasizing fibrous vegetables. Another good point here is that Americans do not eat enough protein on a day-to-day basis. The RDA is laughably low. I'm not sure where they came up with this RDA. Just very outdated research. Maybe it was based on sedentary individuals. But an RDA recommendation of 50 to 80 grams of protein a day is just drastically insufficient for those who are living an active lifestyle. Not only for a muscle building aspect, or not only in the muscle building aspect, but also in what we talked about earlier. Protein is very satiating. Those with a higher protein intake tend to overconsume, or tend to eat, tend to overconsume the unhealthy foods less often. So the ISSN suggests that you want to get around 1.2 up to 1.8 grams per kilogram. I put pound there. 1.2 to 1.8 grams per kilogram is the correct measure for your resistance trained individuals, meaning that a 100 kilo male, 220 pound male should consume anywhere from 120 to 180 grams of protein per day, not the 50 to 80 that's recommended by the RDA. This means that a 2,000 calorie ketogenic diet, 25% of calories from protein, would get 125 grams of protein a day, which meets those ISSN recommendations. Now, the question does exist out there as to how much protein is needed to exit ketosis. And that's a hard question to answer because it hasn't been 100% fleshed out. We don't know exactly what that answer is, because if you put someone on a protein-spared modified fast and they're consuming 200 to 250 grams of protein a day or whatever it is, maybe even higher than that, it looks like their body is still producing ketones. So they're definitely not kicked out of ketosis. So maybe it's favoring proteins that are lower in the amino acids that are gluconeogenic. Not quite sure on that one yet, but it's something to pay attention to. Now, there are some clinical benefits that are on the pros side as well. We won't talk about those. Those are more kind of on the medical side of things. But it looks like ketogenic diets are good for treating those with chronic seizures, usually from epilepsy, glucose control. So for the early stages of treating type 2 diabetes, the ketogenic diet looks favorable, or at least a low carb diet looks favorable, lower carb. And then there's some more research that I've read recently or heard discussed recently about the management of migraines and chronic headaches. So it looks like the ketogenic, they're just clinical trials, case studies, but it looks like the ketogenic diet may also be valuable in treating those as well. Again, we'll wait for some more research there. All right, getting into the cons now, so the negative stuff. So you'll see that the first point here is the exact first point that I made on the IIFYM presentation, and that is that with the ketogenic diet, as with any diet, there is a certain education period that is required. When people think ketogenic diet, they think bacon and eggs, but it's not just bacon and eggs. It's usually leaner proteins, fibrous vegetables, and then your quote-unquote healthy fats, or your nuts, seeds, oils, things like that. So you do still need to eat your vegetables, and most people don't want to do it anymore. You tell them bacon and eggs, they're on board. You tell them vegetables, they're quickly off board. There is also some research that shows that the ketogenic diet is unfavorable for anaerobic and aerobic performance, whether we're looking at time to exhaustion, time trials, or distance trials. And some of that research is over on the left here in the graphic. It shows that, especially in the keto adaptation period, that first 2 to 4-ish weeks when someone is adapting or their body is adapting to run on ketones, we do see a marked decrease in performance in both anaerobic and aerobic bouts of exercise. Now, it's probably only relevant in your higher volumes of training. So for your runners, cyclists, long distance rowers, things like that, it's probably not as important for someone who resistance trains an hour a day and isn't at risk of running out of glycogen during a workout. But that keto adaptation period definitely does, or it can really suck. You hear people talk about getting keto flu, brain fog, performance drops off. And the argument that I always make to athletes who want to switch over to the ketogenic diet is that the research shows that your performance is going to drop off initially with the ketogenic diet and then return back up to baseline. And that drop off could take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. So what I say to them is, are you willing to sacrifice 2 to 4 weeks of your training to return back to baseline? Because when they become keto adapted, people will say, well, they performed just like they were on when they were ingesting high amounts of carbohydrates. And that's fine and dandy, but you basically pissed away 2 to 4 weeks of very valuable time of training. So do you want to waste those couple weeks just to get back to the baseline that you were at before? And we can take that a step further with the individual who just, and his name is eluding me right now, but with the individual who just broke the 2-hour marathon mark. So ran a marathon in under 2 hours. What were they giving him along the way? Were they giving him exogenous ketones? Were they giving him MCT oil? No, they were giving him glucose. They were giving him a carbohydrate solution to drink. And you have to think, well, these individuals at Nike spent millions, probably tens of millions of dollars to break this record. If they thought that exogenous ketones were going to help him, they would have dumped serious money into that, but they didn't. They stuck with the tried and true glucose. So that should tell you something about anaerobic and aerobic performance and the effect of carbohydrate and how that's favorable over exogenous ketones or over ketosis in general. Now, there are some ultra marathoners who have run with very, very successful times, and they've been advocates of the ketogenic diet. But remember, you show up at a marathon, how many of those individuals that are going to be in the top 20 are ingesting carbohydrate during their race, and how many are running on ketosis? The vast majority are going to be going the carbohydrate route. So unless there's some sort of conspiracy here, I would say that when it comes to performance, both in the anaerobic and aerobic realm, stick with carbohydrate. Another con that you can run into is micronutrient deficiencies. Quite a few of these. If you go back to step 1 and you get educated on the food that you need, you may be able to avoid some of these. But the common ones are things like folate, biotin, vitamins A, E, D, chromium, iodine, magnesium, molybdenum, calcium, potassium, your electrolytes, and so on. So if you are going to undertake a ketogenic diet, or you're going to go down that road, make sure that you're looking at the micronutrients in your food so that you can kind of mix and match foods to make sure that you are filling in all those gaps. Last con on this slide we're going to talk about is that people will cite that there is a decrease in lean body mass on the ketogenic diet when measured with DEXA. And the problem with that is that it is actually just DEXA error. It's not an actual decrease in lean body mass. So when we measure with things like ultrasound skin folds or BIA, what we actually see is that it's not the body losing lean body mass, it's losing water. The problem with the DEXA is it can't differentiate between water and muscle mass. So when I go on a ketogenic diet, deplete glycogen, deplete intramuscular water storage, and I hop on the DEXA after losing 4 kilos, I've lost a kilogram of muscle mass, or a kilogram of fat mass rather, and then the DEXA says that I've lost 3 kilograms of muscle mass. It was actually just intramuscular water and glycogen that initially looked like muscle mass. Quick tip for anyone who wants to fool a DEXA. If you're in a research study, don't do this. But if you want to fool a DEXA and look like you got really buff really quick, just carb load and water load the night before. You will look like you gained all this muscle mass, but it's just intramuscular water and carbohydrate. So decrease in lean body mass on the ketogenic diet, probably not the issue that people make it out to be. Some other issues or concerns that I've seen people raise: an influence on gut health. So people will say this very high saturated fat, high animal protein diet will ruin your gut health, and that's likely not the case. We just want to look at the fiber intake of the diet. So yes, you can have fiber from vegetables or not vegetables, but fruits and whole grains, but you still can get plenty of fiber from vegetables of the soluble and insoluble variety, as well as your prebiotic fibers, which we know are extremely beneficial to gut health. So another one that people often say, oh, gut health, what about gut health in the ketogenic diet? Again, if you're educated, you're doing it the right way, it's probably not an issue. I think I made this point on IFYM and flexible dieting as well. We just need more long-term data. So we need to look at dropout rates. In the clinical setting or in the research, it looks like people have a dropout rate that's pretty similar to the general population. Anywhere from that like 25 to 35% range is pretty common for dropout rates on a diet. The ketogenic diet performs roughly in that range, depending on obviously metabolic ward versus free living studies. Another concern that people raise is a long-term cardiovascular risk. People will say, oh, well, it's a high cholesterol diet. Those people don't understand that there's really no link between dietary cholesterol and total cholesterol in the body. The smarter point that people make, or the better point that people make, is that it's a high saturated fat diet. High saturated fats can raise LDLs, your quote-unquote bad cholesterol, which are linked to or correlated with heart disease, and that is true. But again, a smart ketogenic diet isn't just bacon and eggs. It's leaner proteins and it's your healthier fats, nuts, seeds, oils, things like that. So again, not an issue. But I would like to see some more long-term data there. Weight loss and maintenance, definitely want to see more data there. We've all heard terrible anecdotes of people talking about, oh, I went on the keto diet and I lost 10 pounds, but then I stopped because I just couldn't maintain it anymore and I gained 15 pounds back. So what are the numbers there? How much weight are people actually losing on the ketogenic diet? And then what percentage of those individuals are maintaining that weight loss? There's some small and annoying little cons to the diet as well. What's called keto breath. So when you are producing, or when your body is running on ketones, you are going to be producing a high amount of acetate. How does the body get rid of acetate? It breathes it out. So we're looking at like morning breath times 1,000. There are also, we talked about this on the micronutrient side, but there are also concerns about electrolyte imbalance. Pretty easy to fix that. You don't want to do the ketogenic diet if it is contraindicated based off of some clinical condition you may have or pregnancy. So definitely shouldn't be 1, dieting during pregnancy, or 2, going full keto during pregnancy. Some more research on exogenous ketones coming out. I've seen Dr. Eddie Joe post about exogenous ketones a good amount on Instagram. He seems to be very interested in it. He's posting some really good stuff. If you give someone exogenous ketones and they're cycling to exhaustion, they will cycle for longer. Same way that if you give them glucose, they will cycle for longer. So now what we need to figure out is, one group does glucose, one group uses exogenous ketones. Which one increases time to exhaustion more? I have my theory that it's probably glucose, but I would like to see that study done. All right, so moment of truth. Drum roll, please. What is the overall grade on the ketogenic diet? I give it a B-. Wow, a B-. It outperformed IIFYM. And yes, it did. And I'll tell you why. So I think the pros of the ketogenic diet are very, very strong. I think that one of the best ways to have someone succeed on a diet is to give them some very quick initial results. And the ketogenic diet does exactly that. And it's like, well, Ryan, it's not actually results. They're not actually losing fat. Yes, but most dieters don't really care about that in the early stage. It's only in the later stages, when they're looking in the mirror instead of on the scale as much, that they want to see the results in the mirror. So when they jump on the scale after 2 weeks and they've lost 5 pounds, that's very motivating. They're more likely to stick with the diet. So I do like the quick initial results, even though it's not fat, or it's not entirely fat that they're losing in those early stages. I also like the ketogenic diet because it does fit food preferences for some. Some individuals like to have the fattier meats and the higher fat diet. They feel more satiated. They enjoy that style of dieting a little bit more. Cool. I like that it fits their needs. The two that I love the most, so my 2 favorite pros about the ketogenic diet, is it emphasizes a higher protein intake, which I think is extremely important for a population of individuals that does not eat enough protein. And number 2 is it emphasizes fibrous vegetable intake, which again, just like protein, people do not eat enough of. I also like some of the clinical stuff, so I like the research and the direction it's going with with treating seizures, diabetes, early stage diabetes, as well as the migraine stuff. I think it's very, very interesting. Again, we need more research there, but very promising data coming out of those areas of the world. The cons, again, the first two cons are the same as IFYM. It's very easy to screw up, and if you're not educated, you are going to fail on this diet. Most diets, you will go on the internet and you'll see these private keto Facebook groups and whatnot, and everyone there is very, very dogmatic, hard driving, and they say, you know what, the ketogenic diet is the diet. Any other diet is stupid, and the people who follow those diets are also stupid. So the keto crowd is a very, very dogmatic in their beliefs. So I don't like to see that, and they throw around these erroneous claims that aren't really helping out. But you could say that about any diet: paleo, carnivore, keto, IFYM, flexible dieting. People are just going to make erroneous claims because they are stuck in that tribal mentality of my way of doing things, and my people around me, my keto people around me are the best, and you guys all suck. Now, there is the potential for decrease in performance. I do not like ketogenic dieting for athletes, especially your higher intensity, higher volume athletes, which are pretty much all athletes. Stay away from the ketogenic diet. Ingest plenty of carbohydrate. Any sport nutritionist worth their salt will tell you to do exactly that. There is also the issue of micronutrient deficiencies we talked about. Multivitamin and consultations with a registered dietitian can fix that up. As always, I've included my references at the end here. The reference at the top is the one that I use the most, and I encourage you guys to look at that one because it's a very, very good look at the ketogenic diet. And Examine.com just put out a very, very large examination of the ketogenic diet. I believe it's somewhere around a 400-page ebook. If you are interested in this style of dieting and you want to know more, I do recommend buying that. It's extremely comprehensive. It will answer every single question that you have, way more than I could answer. If you want any of the other references, just let me know. Shoot me a DM on Instagram at Gifted Performance or at the Squat Father, the _ Squat Father, the original, often imitated, never duplicated. As always, if you support what we are doing here, if you support the mission, sign up on the website. $30 a month gets you access to the Facebook group, 15 training programs, macronutrient calculations for you, as well as a place for you to track your weigh-ins, set up a meal plan for yourself based on the macros that the website gives you, and track your PRs in your lifts over time. If you want a more personalized approach, make sure to hit up one of our one-on-one coaches via the application on your profile. You can check out the coaches on the Meet the Coaches page. We work with powerlifters, weightlifters, CrossFit, bodybuilders, general fitness clients. We also have 2 physical therapists on staff, which can help you work around or work through some of those injuries that you may have. And we also have posing coaches for you competitors out there. Please, please, please comment, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, tell your friends, tell your mom, tell your dog, let them know. Gifted Performance is putting out the best content in the game right now. And always, you know the drill. Stay gifted. Why would you not? See ya.